I hope you can all hear me properly. My name is Camille. I'm from the Ortus Club, and I will be your Master of Ceremonies today. I'm also joined by my teammate Francis, who I'm sure you've all been in contact with, and we're very grateful for your taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us this morning. So with that, everyone, I would like to formally welcome you all to our virtual masterclass this morning entitled Efficient Solutions in Adapting to Simplified Cloud Infrastructure. So before we get started, I just want to quickly introduce ourselves for those that aren't familiar with us. We are the Ortus Club, and we run knowledge sharing discussions and corporate masterclasses where senior executives and professionals, such as yourselves, can come together to learn and discuss industry-specific topics. Our session today will last us approximately 1 hour and 30 minutes. So I would like to take this time to acknowledge our hosts for today, without whom this event would not be possible. Everyone, we have Cloud Kinetics, VMware, and AWS. We are extremely grateful for the trust and the opportunity that they've given us to gather you all here together today. Now with that, I would like to bring everyone through our agenda today. So after this introduction, we will be hearing a few words from Cloud Kinetics, which will then be followed by our first presentation entitled VMC on AWS, Cloud Migration Strategy, What to Look Out For, by VMware, which will then be followed by the presentation Modernization with VMC and AWS Native Services by AWS. And we will be ending with a presentation entitled Use Case and Scenarios for VMC on AWS by Cloud Kinetics. After all the presentations, we will of course be giving you some time to ask any questions you might have via the chat box to our presenters. And we will be ending at 11:30 a.m. Speaking of presenters, I have the pleasure of introducing our speakers for today. So we have Wenqi Lee, Group CTO and Head of Global Delivery at Cloud Kinetics. Wenqi, do you want to say a quick hi?
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Thank you. We also have Puneet Arora, Cloud Solution Architect at VMware. Puneet.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining.
We also have Sawab Ahmed, a Partner Solutions Architect at AWS.
Thanks for joining, everyone.
And Zihao Pang, Solutions Architect from Cloud Kinetics.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining.
All right. So before I hand over the floor to Wenqi for his opening remarks, I do want to let everyone know that we do have some engagement activities prepared for all of you. So firstly, we have hidden Wally in 2 presentations today, and all you have to do is be the first one to spot him and let us know via the chat box the title of the slide that you see him in. And the first one to get the correct answer will win an Amazon gift voucher worth $50. So we have 2 of these hidden in 2 different presentations. And if you didn't win there, we also have a little quiz prepared at the end of the other presentation. So it's the same mechanics. If you are the first one to type in the correct answer, you will be winning an Amazon gift voucher worth $50. We also have a lucky draw prepared at the very end. So if you do stick around to the very end of our session today, you will be getting a chance to win a Bose waterproof speaker. All right, so that's it on our end. I'll be handing over the floor to Wenqi for his opening remarks. Wenqi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Camille. Okay, give me a minute to... So I only welcome everybody. This on my honor. It's our honor, Cloud Kinetics honor, to really host all the senior executive joint session. VMware and AWS, this is one of my favorite topics. Okay, I will go into a bit more later, but I only have 2 slides. I will leave all more the technical stuff to the technical folks to share you more, right, from the team from both VMware and AWS team and our solution architect. Okay. So maybe a bit about myself. So I'm actually, I was a founder for, you can see there are actually 2 companies over here, Cloud Kinetics and Member Infofabrica. I'm not sure if anybody heard about both companies, Cloud Kinetics and Infofabrica. So maybe 1 year before, actually both of us have been acquired. So then I was the founder for Infofabrica. Then last year, actually we merged, become a Infofabrica group, and then I will go to market plan called Cloud Kinetics. So I took a new role for the group company, a group CTO, and managed the global delivery. So this is a bit introduction on the entire company. With the merger company, actually we have 450 customers, the cloud certification every day. I guess it's one very important KPI. One of the every day actually cloud certification increasing at this moment, maybe 400 plus cloud certification, and we have done more than 300 plus success cloud migration. And very important, right? Actually, we have I guess a big backer and committed investment from I Square, 100 million. If we give some example, right? You have not hear about Cloud Kinetics for Fabrica before, maybe you should have heard about like one of the biggest telco data center in Singapore, Telstra, right? Actually, last year, you look at the news, I Square acquired Telstra data center. So become this company called BDX. This is our sister company. So actually, this also, we have a lot of synergy working together with our data center BDX to really help customers to move to cloud journey. So one of our chapter, why we are joint force, why I Square invest us. So we want to grow, become a number one multi-hybrid cloud MSP in Asia Pac. So you can see the partnership, actually our number one partner here is AWS and VMware. Later we share, so we are AWS premium partner, migration community. I guess definitely we are one of the top partner in this region for AWS. Also we are the one on top, some area number one partner for VMware. So we have all our HQ is Singapore. We have office all over the entire ASEAN. So we have operation in USA. We are opening office in Germany, Australia. So our courses offering, right? So help you to migrate to cloud. Definitely we help you to manage it. And everybody talking about app modernization, right? So we also help you to modernize your app, help you to drive data, more insights. So we have a data analytic practice also. The last things I want to mention a bit, right? So make your life easier. Actually, we have our own cloud management portal. So we can provide one single dashboard, one single portal, help you to manage multi-cloud. Like this, where in life, VMware vision, right? If you have AWS, you have other hyperscaler, actually one dashboard will help you to manage multi-cloud. So this is the last slide I have. Unfortunately, I don't have Wally, and then you need to spot the Wally for other presenter, right? So I try to make this short and then really handle the bit to the core team, right? So we are a few years ago, right? Around 3 years ago, we also a launch partner for VMware AWS. So I love this. I guess a lot of you, like if you are in IT field long enough, you know, like combining, I guess the best private cloud and best public cloud in the world is, I guess, it's a fantastic idea. This is where I guess VMware on AWS come in the picture. But I guess a few years back when you launch it, I guess there's a few challenges I see. When I launch it with a launch partner, we are here what the challenge from the customer. One is this is not the time, right? We say this is not real cloud, right? You need to upfrontly invest to buy minimum to know whatever to really enjoy this services. So this is a heavy. Then number two, like resource. It's not easy to find expertise have both AWS and VMware. So now our value, it give you both. Once we are the only one, first one in the region have AWS migration and VMC master competency expertise. Number two, we make it is a utility model. You don't need to upfront invest. So if you want to enjoy one of the best hybrid cloud architecture in the world, actually you can pay per use. Even one VM, you can try out. Later on, we'll touch a bit more on the free POC, right, when I closing, okay? Yeah. So I hope you enjoy the session. I will hand it over back to Camille, okay?
All right, thank you for that welcome, Wenchi. And before I hand it on to Puneet to get started, as Wenchi did mention, don't forget to look for Wally. And we're looking forward to someone winning the prizes. Puneet, the floor is yours. Let's get this masterclass started.
Thanks, Camille. And let me quickly share my screen. Can you confirm the screen is visible?
Yes, it's
okay.
Thanks.
Great. All right. So first of all, good morning and welcome everyone. Thank you for taking out time and being a part of this session. I am Puneet, the Cloud Solutions Architect for VMware Cloud and AWS service at VMware, and I handle business for VMware Cloud and AWS for the Southeast Asia and Korea region. In today's session and in this particular section of the presentation, I will be focusing on how VMware Cloud and AWS can help you strategize your cloud migration in a seamless and a risk-free fashion. So let's quickly jump into that. But before we go to the migration part and talk about VMware Cloud and AWS, I would want to spend a minute on what is VMware Cloud vision in general. So today, if you see, VMware is trying to solve a very unique problem. Since most of you belong to IT sectors and have been or are part of big enterprise organizations, I'm sure you would be aware of the fact that VMware did manage to solve the enterprise data center problems by introducing the private cloud model. So today you would be running commodity hardware layered with VMware software-defined data center stack, hosting the private cloud service offering, which you are successfully running and consuming in your on-prem data centers. But I also believe that you appreciate the fact that within the enterprise, there are business units who are also consuming certain services from maybe other hyperscalers, which are not hosted on-prem, right? So public cloud offerings, which are more appropriate for maybe development workforce, or maybe bringing in some sort of agility to your businesses are being consumed by different business groups within the organization. And that's something which is very, very common. A lot of organizations outside their on-prem data centers are also running services which are hosted in public cloud. And that sort of is creating multiple islands of data center which are consumed by an enterprise today. From an IT perspective, it becomes a challenge. It becomes a challenge because the IT team has to now manage not just the on-prem services, but also have to manage services which are spread across different zones and different islands of different hyperscalers. And that brings in various other challenges, which we will deep dive on as we go forward in the session. But to solve this problem, what VMware is doing is VMware is trying to maintain the option of multiple choices, but at the same point in time, is trying to bring in a uniform and a ubiquitous platform which can be spread across not just your on-prem environment, but can now be delivered on other hyperscaler, public cloud, and even edge-based services. So VMware Cloud and AWS and VMware Cloud and AWS Outpost and VMware Dell EMC are some of these offerings which VMware has jointly partnered and engineered with our hyperscaler partners to bring it to our customers, which give them the flexibility of running their workloads, not just on-prem, but also in cloud environment, getting the benefits of both the world. This effectively gives you time to value to launch your services in a faster manner, but at the same point in time also offers you choice that you can run your workloads on-prem or on public cloud or on both the environments in a hybrid fashion. Right, so that's what VMware vision is, and that's what VMware is trying to solve. But to understand this in more details, let me just move on to my next slide to talk about some of the deeper challenges which we have seen with enterprises or enterprises are grappling to solve when they are going forward with a multi-cloud strategy. So generally, when enterprises believe that they would want to solve problem by consuming multiple cloud, and that's becoming very, very common nowadays because as I said earlier, different business groups may have inclination to host their applications, their services on a selective platform because of the inclination towards, let's say, licensing or let's say developer workforce, like a specific PaaS environment more than the others. There are these shadow IT scenarios where you will have different disciplines and different platforms being operated in an environment. From an IT point of view, the challenge it brings to the table is that because you have now multiple environments, these environments are totally different from each other. And that brings in operational inconsistencies, which means, for example, the processes, the tools, even the policies you run in one cloud environment or even in private cloud environment may not be extended to the other environment. So you may have different monitoring tools, you may have different backup processes, you may have different disaster recovery solutions, which may operate in different manner across different cloud platforms. And thus, it's sort of making you more agile, sort of slows down the entire process from a day-to perspective. Not just that, if you look at something like a security control and security framework, you would realize that the more choices you have on the table in form of different hyperscaler platforms or different cloud platforms, you would have to think from different perspectives when it comes to networking, when it comes to security, because there is no consistency across different environments. Even if your application is designed in a way, and a lot of application vendors are trying to do that, they're trying to create an application stack which can be hosted on different platforms. So one tier of an application may be using database on one cloud platform, and you may be running some AI/ML services on a different platform. If you break up your application to run across different public cloud platforms, you would see that there is an inconsistency in the SLAs, which you can offer from an application perspective back to business, because different cloud platforms run on different SLAs, and it's very difficult to combine that. So these are some of the challenges which we have really seen with enterprises, or enterprises are trying to solve, because it's good to have a multi-cloud strategy, but it is very difficult to manage that from a day-to perspective. And that sort of, over a period of time, adds on to the challenges rather than solving the major problem. And this is where VMware comes into picture. So VMware in 2016 announced a partnership with AWS, and we announced to launch a jointly engineered service called as VMware Cloud and AWS. So in 2016, during the VMworld, our ex-CEO announced a partnership where we bring in the best of both the worlds. So VMware has successfully managed to virtualize your compute, network, storage, security in your on-prem data center, whereas AWS brings in the agility, the scalability, and the global reach. So both the benefits of both these worlds have been combined together now to bring you this VMware Cloud and AWS service offering. Now you can see that this service is already more than 6 years old, which means it is very mature in nature. We have plenty of customers across the globe who have really adopted this service. They have really gone ahead and migrated out their workloads from their on-prem environment and moved to VMware Cloud and AWS service, which is predominantly the VMware software-defined data center stack, now hosted in AWS data centers. So with that, we definitely bring to the table the agility and the flexibility you get with the cloud environment. But at the same point in time, we do not really change the underneath building blocks. We maintain the same building blocks you were running in your on-prem data center, which is the same proven vSphere, vSAN, NSX sort of workload environments, and we just port them over to VMware Cloud and AWS and maintain the operational consistency there. So let me just double click on this in a little more and try to explain you from the perspective of migration. So when we talk about migration to cloud, right, that becomes a very, very important and pivotal point when you talk about cloud adoption. A lot of enterprises pick and choose a specific cloud offering, and then the next step is to migrate your existing applications which are running on-prem over to cloud. And there are a couple of ways of doing this. This slide, I have borrowed this slide from AWS. You can see this listed by AWS in a couple of their public collaterals as well. So there are different methodologies using which you can migrate your applications over to cloud. And these are also known as 7 Rs. Some of them are as simple as retire or retain, which means you either decommission your existing old applications and possibly move to a SaaS model, or you keep the applications on-prem because they may not be the best fit to be moved to cloud. So that is the retain model. And some of them could be very, very advanced, like refactor, where you would probably just let the existing applications phase out and then modernize those applications using cloud native capabilities, converting them into microservices architecture, breaking them into containers format, and then run it as container services on public cloud. So that's the refactor part. But if you look at the complexities involved with the majority of the advanced migration methodologies, you would realize that while it may be a very fancy method of migrating applications to cloud, and a lot of customers and enterprises are really doing that, it may not be as simple as it sounds, right? And this is where you get into this concept of cattle versus pet. So generally, with VMware and AWS and Cloud Kinetics, we actually help customers discover which applications are better suited to be modernized and which applications may not be a good candidate of modernization, right? And this is where we sort of segregate your existing landscape into cattle versus pet. applications which can be converted to kettle sort of an application may be good candidates for refactoring, but there would be a bunch of applications and bulk of applications which you may not want to touch. You may not want to modernize them because they are probably legacy applications or applications which were developed by some in-house developers who are not there anymore, or various other reasons, right? So these are applications you would like to maintain as pets, who you would want to give all the love and then keep them the way they are, right? And such applications may not want to be modernized, and then they fall into this category of rehost or relocate. Now, these are applications where we generally just lift and shift these application stacks and move them to cloud as is, without making any changes to the operating system or making any modifications to the application stack itself. And this is where VMware Cloud and AWS sort of plays and shines out as compared to other migration methodologies. So if you look at a deeper level in the process of migration, you realize that all other methods of migration, like rehost or replatform or even re-architect, involve multiple sub-steps for you to move your applications from your on-prem to a cloud environment. And sometimes these steps may not be as straightforward or simple and could be time-consuming. I would not mince, but I can also say that at times these could be as complex because of the processes attached to these migration activities that it can actually de-risk the timeline of the migration project. So how do we solve this problem? Because migration becomes an important step for you to do cloud modernization. So with relocate strategy, which linked to VMware Cloud and AWS service, we can actually move your applications as is without modification of the formats of your virtual machine, without making any configurational changes or any major configurational changes, and then using this very, very pristine purpose-built migration engine called as HCX to just do a long distance vMotion from your on-prem environment to the VMware Cloud and AWS environment. So with VMware HCX, you can actually just lift and shift your applications or virtual machines as is, and then migrate it over to VMware Cloud and AWS. Now that gives you a risk-free method of migration that also associated to rapid migration, which means we have really seen customers using this technology to sort of migrating hundreds of their virtual machine application tiers over a few days to cloud, which is unforeseen and which is unprecedented as well. So ever since we introduced this technology and we had early adopters, we really saw the adoption of VMware Cloud and AWS was driven because of the ease and the risk-freeness of your migration to cloud, and that happens to be the unique selling point. Having said that, it may be one use case where you are wanting to migrate your application that you don't want to really change the application. But we have customers coming back to us and say, hey, you know what? Yeah, it's good that we can move to cloud and you can help us migrate to VMware Cloud and AWS in a very fast and efficient manner. But we really want to modernize our applications. How do we do that? So today with VMware Cloud and AWS, I'm very pleased to announce that we just don't use VMware Cloud and AWS to run your applications as virtual machines, how you do it on your on-prem data center today. VMware Cloud and AWS also support modernized, containerized applications using some of our modernized Kubernetes platform services, which are now included in VMware Cloud and AWS. So we're going to touch upon that, and I think in the following sessions, we'll also talk about how you can leverage some of the native AWS services to attach to virtual machines running in VMware Cloud and AWS. So you'll see that. Talking about the benefits, right? And we did this study along with IDC, so there's a link to the IDC report, which is publicly published now. We have tried to gauge the benefits in terms of economics when the customers adopted VMware Cloud and AWS. So we went back to all the customers who have consumed the service to identify what are the benefits they have achieved by consuming VMware Cloud and AWS service. And we realized that with choosing VMware Cloud and AWS, they have managed to spend 57% lower in terms of migration as compared to they would have done if they would have moved to, let's say, a native cloud service correspondingly. We have also seen that this has significantly reduced the amount of efforts it took for us to migrate applications to VMware Cloud and AWS because it required less staff involvement. The automation and the migration functionalities which are built in are very, very efficient in themselves, that it doesn't really need a lot of people and skill involvement to do the migration. VMware Cloud on AWS is built on bare metal EC2 instances from AWS layered by VMware software-defined data center stack. So what we generally do is we pick up a pool of physical HCI servers from AWS inventory, and then we automatically deploy vSphere, vSAN, NSX over it. So this is a very purpose-built cloud tenant, which is provisioned for customers who subscribe to VMware Cloud and AWS service. And it is very efficient in terms of performance and utilization factors, which is why you see that you can achieve great consolidation ratios of virtual machines you can host on a single node. And that is why when we do a comparison of what the customers were using on-prem for running, let's say, X amount of virtual machine versus what they need to use on VMware Cloud and AWS, you would see that the amount of IT infrastructure saved or the money saved and spent for IT infrastructure is greatly reduced, right? And then also because VMware Cloud and AWS is not just the engineered solution, we also layered that with the managed services, which comes along with VMware Cloud and AWS service. VMware takes responsibility of patching your infrastructure when you run your virtual machines on VMware Cloud and AWS. VMware takes care of any hardware failures, any software updates for vSphere, vSAN, NSX, any patching of that environment as part of the managed services. This also reduces the overhead customers have to spend in terms of managing the environment. So the customers now need to only focus on the application and the virtual machines itself, rather than taking care of the infrastructure. And this is where Cloud Kinetics can come into picture. So Cloud Kinetics would be the customer MSP partner, which can take care of the application workloads, even if the customer wants to outsource that. And not just to mention, VMware Cloud and AWS is also packed with a SLA commitment. So we generally also offer a SLA commitment of uptime of 99.9% when you subscribe to VMware Cloud and AWS. So this overall sort of improves the availability, the resiliency of your existing application, and give you a platform which can scale out, which can be available in multiple regions, which is flexible to consume for a lot of enterprises, and that sort of adds value. I just want to quickly conclude, and before I hand it over to Sawab, some of the common use cases we have really seen for which enterprises have adopted VMware Cloud and AWS service. So VMware Cloud and AWS, in VMware world, we call it as a Swiss Army knife, because we can use this for achieving multiple use cases, as you can see on the screen, right? And one of the most common use case is DC evac or on-premises evacuation. Imagine a scenario that you are running your data centers in a colo location, which is very common in Singapore region, for example, or APJ region in general, right? And you are nearing an end of contract. You are looking to improve the operational efficiency. You want to move out of this colo, but you don't really have time to find out a new colo provider and then test that and then migrate workload. This is where you can actually just consume VMware Cloud and AWS as the de facto standard, because it's a platform built using AWS hardware related VMware software-defined data center stack. The availability is across different regions. We have a high availability architecture using different availability zones, all the goodness of AWS. And then we provide you this migration engine, which can lift and shift your virtual machines as is and migrate out of your on-premises environment or colo environment and move your workload to VMware Cloud and AWS. The benefit you get is you don't really have to adopt any change. Your operational models, your processes, your tools, your skill set can be seamlessly extended to this new platform, which is now hosted in AWS data centers. And trust me when I say this, a lot of enterprises across the globe have really taken advantage of this, because they have managed to migrate hundreds of their virtual machines over weekends. So it didn't take them like months and years to do this migration. They did it over a few weeks. And these are all published case studies which can be read on VMware website. So this is one of the very common use case. But having said that, VMware Cloud on AWS can also be used as a hybrid extension of your cloud or on-prem environment. You want to retain your on-prem environment, but you want more capacity because you're growing and you don't really want to invest into more hardware, maybe because of space issues or maybe because of the global supply chains impacted by the chip unavailability today. So you can just simply subscribe to VMware Cloud on AWS service, attach it to your on-prem data center, extend the capacity in cloud, and then start consuming it. Or in case you have a seasonal requirement, which only comes during the World Cup time or maybe during a specific season, you can just cloud burst into VMware Cloud on AWS, and like any other cloud platform, it's available as an on-demand service as well. So you just expand when you want and then contract when you're not using it. So there are some very common use cases which we have really seen customers adopting. Some of the more advanced and more niche use cases are like DR use case. So with the advent of pandemic, we have really seen a lot of enterprises thinking about BCP planning. They are thinking how do they come up with DR data centers without really investing into a full facility. So VMC on AWS can act as your DR site. Again, we have options for different RPO targets. It's available in a active fashion. It's available as an active passive on-demand model. So various options technologically and commercially available there. Virtual desktop hosting happens to be another big use case where we have more and more workforce now working from home, and you really want the users to just come into their on-prem applications in a secure fashion. So that can be achieved using virtual workspaces, and VMware Cloud on AWS can host not just VMware VDI solutions, but third-party VDI solutions as well. So that happens to be a great use case as well. And I think one of the interesting ones is the one in the lower left-hand side corner around AWS proximity. And I think Swab's going to talk about that in more details. But because now you can actually have your virtual machine, that workload sitting in AWS data center, you are in a close proximity to native AWS services. So imagine that you have a virtual machine which is pumping out a lot of data, and you want to save this data into, let's say, object storage capacity in AWS like S3, or let's say you want to use some analytical tools or services like Fargate or Lambda for serverless configuration. You can now just attach your virtual machine to native AWS services in a more efficient and cost-free manner. Where as a part of the service, we absorb some of the egress charges or data charges between native AWS and VMware Cloud and AWS services. And then it gives you an efficiency because now you are sitting very close to the world, to native AWS services, or latencies are handled, your bandwidth is taken care of, and the egress charges are also absorbed. So very, very unique use cases. We have really seen some banking customers, FSI customers leveraging those. And with this, I would like to end my session, and I'll take the questions in the chat, but I would want to hand over the session back to Swab now. Swab, over to you.
Thanks, Puneet, for an informative session. Let me quickly share my screen. Okay, hope you're able to see my screen now.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So yeah, thanks, Puneet, for an informative session. We saw the benefits of using VMC on AWS and the different features that it provides. And this session will double click a little bit more on why VMC and how we can migrate and modernize our workloads on VMware Cloud and AWS. Right. So for this session, as an agenda, we'll have first, what does it mean to migrate and modernize the workloads with VMware Cloud and AWS. And then we'll also see how we can connect the VMware workloads on VMC environment to a native AWS environment. Right? We'll see what are the different connectivity options that we have. And finally, we also will touch upon some of the native integration examples. Right. So to start with, before I jump onto the migration and modernization aspect, let me briefly talk about why VMC. right? So initially, when most of the customers that we talk to today, when they think about migration to cloud, oftentimes the reason is because of the goodness that the cloud provides, right? For example, elasticity, the scalability, then the agility that cloud provides. But at the same time, when we start a discussion about migrating those workloads, oftentimes the cost becomes an important factor as well, right? So what you're trying to address here using VMC is, right? So what you see in the slide here is without using VMC, right? When you first try to migrate your workloads, say for example, to a native AWS cloud, initially you will see that the cost will spike up a little bit. The reason for this is because you'll have to plan out the migration, and you'll also have to spend for upskilling your resources to manage and maintain two environments. One is the VMware on the on-premises side and the AWS on the native side, right? And this adds up to the cost. And also you'll have to, kind of change the format of the virtual machines that you're managing from a VMware platform to the AWS platform. So all of these, adds up to the cost as well as time for migration. What we are trying to change here is bringing in VMC into this equation, right? So as you see, what we call as a migration cost bubble significantly reduces, right? So ideally, when you migrate to a public cloud like AWS, you will see the cost benefit. You'll realize the cost benefit only after most of your workloads, at least 100% of your workload has been migrated, right? With VMC, you'll start seeing the cost benefit much earlier in the cycle, right? So you start seeing around 20 to 30% of the migration is done. You start seeing the cost benefit. That's because you have significantly reduced the migration time and the effort, right? So, and this in turn will, give your teams more time to focus on innovation and building cloud native applications. So just wanted to have this in there before we, start with the how we do the migration and the modernization, right? So as you see, as Puneet has spoken earlier about, I'll also briefly touch upon this. So in the left-hand side, you see this on-premises data center that you have on a customer environment today, right? So when we subscribe for the VMC service, what we deploy is what we call as a software-defined data center. And this software-defined data center consists of a software-defined compute, software-defined storage, and software-defined networking, which is a vSphere, vSAN, and NSX. Some of the customers will already have this on their on-premises environment. It is not necessary to have NSX on your on-premises environment, right? You can, run on your native VDS networking, vSphere distributed switches, and you can still, migrate it to VMC environment, right? So once you have this deployed in this AWS global infrastructure, then comes the connectivity part, right? So you can have either a direct connect setup across from your on-premises side to your AWS, or you can also run over a VPN on the internet, right? So the only difference is that in direct connect, you'll get a guaranteed bandwidth from AWS. All right, so once you have this connectivity established, you can then deploy all the tool sets that you're using on your on-premises site today. Those can be deployed on the VMC on AWS as well, because it's a like-to-like environment similar to what you have on your on-premises site. The operations team who are managing and maintaining those environments on-premises could be leveraged to manage this environment as well. Right, so talking about the native side, right, that's where the modernization part comes, right? So when you first deploy this VMC, which is in the middle, the VMC SDDC, when somebody is deploying this, right, it will first ask to connect a native AWS account, right? The reason for this is when you provide this AWS account, it will then ask you which VPC you want to use for this, right? The reason why it asks for this is establishes a backend connectivity, which is a high bandwidth connectivity from your VMC cloud on AWS to your native AWS account, right? And from there onwards, when this is deployed, you already have a high bandwidth connectivity to your AWS side, with which you can integrate all the AWS native services, right? And let's take a deeper look into this, right? So we'd like to divide this into two different phases for our customers, right? So we call it as a migrate phase, and then we call it as a modernize phase. And on the migration phase, what we have is, first we try to utilize the AWS services that we have, or the features that we have, like, for example, Direct Connect I spoke about, and Puneet talked about using S3, right, for an object storage, for example. So those are the services which could be quickly utilized when you are migrating from your on-premises to an AWS or VMC on AWS cloud, right? And then comes the integration part, right? The integration part basically talks about utilizing and integrating with different AWS services with the high bandwidth connectivity that I mentioned earlier, which is called as ENI, which is Elastic Network Interface, that allows you to connect to all these native services, like for example, AWS Data Sync, which is a data transfer service, or for example, if you have an application where you're using a load balancer, for example, on an on-premises side, you could use AWS services like application load balancer, or even file storage services like FSX and so on. Right? Those could be integrated to VMC workloads. So if you have a file server sitting on your on-premises and you moved it to your AWS or VMC on AWS Cloud, you can then integrate with file services like FSX from AWS side. Right. So once you have migrated and you're operating on an AWS or a VMC on AWS environment, and when you have a comfort level of operating on VMC on AWS, you'll then start thinking about optimization of this environment, right? So for example, we have customers who might be using like a database server, for example, right? You could be running Oracle, Microsoft SQL, and so on. So those database servers, when you're running on VMC on AWS, you are actually maintaining and managing those servers yourself, the operating systems yourself, right? If you want to leverage and offload those management tasks, you could utilize something like a managed database services from AWS, like RDS, for example, which is a relational database service, and which provides most of the major databases out there, like Oracle, Microsoft SQL, MS SQL, MySQL, PostgreSQL, MariaDB, and so on, right? So those databases are available on those RDS services. So you can use AWS features like database migration services, and you can migrate those databases to RDS services, and you can offload the management activities, and you can just focus on running your databases, right? And there are other examples for say, like you running an application and you want to store your secrets somewhere, instead of maintaining a server for containing your secrets or storing your secrets, you could use AWS Secret Manager, for example. Right. And once you have optimized your environment, then you go up further down the maturity scale, and then you start thinking about how I can innovate within my organization, and how I can build cloud native applications and leverage tools and features like AWS analytics and machine learning, for example, right? So you can innovate and build cloud native applications, and you can use containerized based platforms from AWS, like Elastic Kubernetes Service, Elastic Container Services, and so on. Right, so this is where the maturity comes into place, right? So, for example, if a customer is first thinking about migration to cloud, we first introduce the migration phase, where they first get a comfort level of running their workloads in VMC and AWS, and then we talk about the modernization phase. All right, so let's talk about, when we talk about modernization, obviously we start thinking about what are the connectivity options we have from the VMC on AWS to the AWS native side, right? The first type of connectivity is the connected VPC, right? So the connected VPC is basically the connectivity option that you provided when you deployed the VMC or VMware Cloud on SDDC, right? Which is a direct one-to-one connectivity, right? We have other types of connectivity like VMware Transit Connect, which is a connectivity option which is managed by VMware. This is based on AWS Transit Gateway. Some of you might be already aware of AWS Transit Gateway. And the third connectivity type is using Transit Gateway from AWS, from connecting from a VMware VMC environment to a native AWS environment. And I'll briefly touch upon each of these. Right, the first type of connectivity, which is a connected VPC. As I mentioned, when you deploy in VMware SDDC, it will first ask you to connect an AWS account, right? So when you provide this account, each host which is deployed in the VMware SDDC cluster will have a backend connectivity, which is a high bandwidth connectivity to the AWS native side, right? And one of this host, the adapter for one of this host will remain active, and any VMs which are residing on this VMC environment will use this active link to transfer data from your VMC environment to the to the AWS native side, right? If one of these hosts happens to go down, then this will fail over to another host in this cluster, right? So in that fashion, you will never have any link going down, because it will fall back to another host. And this host, if it goes down, obviously it will be replaced by another host in this cluster, and so on. Right, so this is a connectivity, design where you connect from one SDDC to one VPC. Right, so we have customers who might be asking, okay, I have one SDDC, but I want to connect to more than one VPCs. I have multiple VPCs. How do I connect to multiple VPCs? Right, that's where the VMware Transit Connect comes into picture. So the VMware Transit Connect is a logical construct which is managed and maintained by VMware. It is based on the AWS Transit Gateway technology, and this allows connecting from AWS, connecting from a VMC SDDC to an AWS native VPC. Right, as you can see in this picture, any traffic that flows from a VMC SDDC or to a VMware SDDC can utilize this VMware Transit Connect. So in other words, you can have traffic flowing from an SDDC to a VPC to an SDDC, or an SDDC to an SDDC, right? So if you have a requirement for a traffic to flow from one VPC to another native VPC, we would not utilize VMware Transit Connect, right? The VMware Transit Connect is not used for that, right? For that, you would be using AWS Transit Gateway. Right, so let me also briefly touch upon the differences between these two. Right, so VMware Transit Connect is a high bandwidth connectivity, like till 50 Gbps. It is maintained by VMware, and the traffic is not encrypted. Right, you don't have a VPN running over there. Right, in AWS Transit Gateway, what you have is you can connect multiple VPCs using AWS Transit Gateway, which is ideally the case even without VMC. And when you bring VMC into this equation, what you can achieve is this can have connectivity over to the NSX edge router, right, from the VMC environment. So if you need, or if you have a requirement to connect from your VMC environment to multiple SDDCs, you can see in this picture here that you have a native attached to VPC, but you can also connect to other VPCs over this transit gateway running over a VPN. Right, that's how you can achieve, multiple connectivity from your VMC SDDC to a native AWS site. Right, and just to add to this, right, so each transit gateway or a VMware Transit Connect can have 5 attachments to it. Right, so if you need more attachments, you can bring in more transit gateways or VMware Transit Connects. And we have recently allowed intra-region peering as well. What I mean by that is you can peer more than one transit gateway staying within the same AWS regions, or intra-region, which is from one AWS region to another AWS region as well. Right, let me quickly touch on some of the native integration examples, right? So this example, as I was talking about earlier, you can use database migration services from AWS to move your database server from your on-premises to AWS Cloud. And, you can move and utilize services like Amazon RDS, or even data warehousing services like Amazon Redshift, for example. Right, and we have some other type of examples, right? So this example, we're talking about traffic flowing from a VMC to the native site, right? We have other examples like in this one, for example, where you see a traffic flowing in from the native site to the VMC SDDC. So in this example, what we are trying to show here is you have some applications running on your on-premises site, which you have already migrated to the AWS site. And you can see that there are 2 VMs here, which are part of this application. And you were running, say, for example, a load balancer in front of this in your on-premises. You can now utilize load balancing services from AWS, which is an application load balancer here. So when a user connects to this application, he will first hit like another service from AWS, which is a web application firewall. So he will hit the landing page, he'll put in his login credentials, and maybe you'll have a CAPTCHA using the WAF here, right? So once you put all these credentials, and then it will use the AWS Internet Gateway, which will then pass the traffic on to the application load balancer. And this application load balancing group, you will set the IP target group as your VMC IP addresses, right? So you can set the IP addresses of the VMs which are running within the VMC environment in this application load balancing group. And then it will forward the traffic using the ENI high bandwidth connectivity to the NSX edge router, which will then distribute the traffic across to the VMC VMs. Right, so this is another type of connectivity here. The third one, which is an interesting one I'd like to touch upon, is bring your own IP address to VMC Cloud AWS. So we have heard from customers who are asking, right? So they have, say, for example, monolithic legacy applications, which are business critical applications running on their environment. And these applications could be running on multiple sites or a multi-site application, right? So how do you bring in those applications to AWS and also migrate over your public static IP addresses? Right, so what you can do is VMware, as of today, does not allow to bring in the public static IP addresses to your VMC environment, within the VMC environment. But what you can achieve is to bring in those IP addresses to your AWS account, right? So those IP addresses could be brought over to an elastic IP pool in AWS, and using services like, using services like your network load balancer and netting, and other AWS services like VMware Transit Connect and so on, you can actually bring in a multi-site application, which is a monolithic legacy application, using public static IP addresses to your VMC environment. So what you see here is a URL, which is app.corp.com, which is a public URL, which will in turn be backed by a global site load balancer, which is GSLB, and it will translate to a public IP address, and which will then use netting to net it to a private IP address. And with help of these network load balancers, as you can see here, it will first route the traffic using the VMware Transit Connect, using one of these availability zones, and it will go into the web tier, right? So in our case, the web tier and the app tier is sitting on the same availability zone in the same region. So it will just seamlessly pass over the traffic to the app tier. And what we see here is the database tier is actually sitting on a different availability zone in a different region altogether, right? So this app tier will then leverage the VMware Transit Connect, and this Transit Connects that we have designed here are multi-site Transit Connects. In other words, they are peered, right? So with this multi-site peering, what we could see is this app tier will then pass on the traffic to a different region, or database server sitting on a different region, right? And this database servers could be replicated. You see here a read and write, and these are only read replicas where it's been synchronized across in different regions. So this is a typical way, I would say, how we can bring bring your public static IP addresses to VMC Cloud on AWS, right? And finally, I'd also like to touch upon one of the use cases where we talk about a data warehousing use cases and reference architecture, for example, right? So here you see a database server which is sitting on a VMC environment, right? And you're talking over an AWS Direct Connect, going over a gateway, and then you're talking to the database, right? So what we can do is you can replicate this database using something like a database managed, a DMS service. And it will a database migration service, and you can actually replicate those into an S3 bucket. And with other AWS services, which I talked upon earlier, using like Redshift, you can actually extract those data, and then using other services like Amazon QuickSight, for example. This is one of the customer use cases that they have been using, and you can actually get more business insights and visibility into those data using other AWS services, for example, QuickSight, for example, right? So these are some of the use cases I wanted to briefly touch upon, and happy to answer any questions in our Q&A session. Thanks for listening. And over to you, Zihao, for your next session. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Saurabh. Give me a few moments. Let me share my slides. All right. Thank you, Saurabh. Hi, good morning, everyone. So my name is Zihao. I'm here a solutions architect at Cloud Kinetics. So I'll be spending the next few minutes to share about the use cases and scenarios. So before we dive into the use cases and scenarios, I would just like to spend a bit of time really to bring together what Puneet and Saurabh has just shared, because essentially use cases and scenarios is actually an extension of what they have actually shared. So let's jump straight in. I mean, so for every move, every digital transformation, we want to understand why do we want to even make the move in the first place. So typically, when we want to do any cloud migration or any investment in moving our workloads from on-premises to the cloud, essentially what we are trying to do is we want to move a more legacy way of hosting our infrastructure, our workloads, to a more modern way of doing. And why do we want to do so? Is because we really want to unlock all the benefits which the cloud can offer. And in terms, right, this really translates to more long-term value for our businesses. But for every move, it often entails a risk in the sense that there can be a risk in terms of complexity, whereby to refactor an app, it is not a very easy task. For example, it takes about 7.4 years to refactor and migrate about 100 applications to the cloud. There's also the cost. There's also the risk of having a over budget, running of the budget in terms of cost, as well as time factor as well. So that's where VMware Cloud and AWS can actually come in. It helps to mitigate all these challenges that we should talk about and really unlock the benefits which the cloud can actually offer. So for VMware on VMware Cloud and AWS, what you actually get is really not just running your VMware stack on on AWS, right? What you really have is really expanded functionality because while you do have all the functionalities of your NSX, vSphere, and vSpan, what you also can have in addition is that you always have the latest version of VMware running, and you can always have access to the newest features. And like what Sawa has previously shared, so you do have access to the rich AWS services that is available at your fingertips. So essentially what this means that you do have the best of both worlds. You can leverage on the benefits of the on-premises environment as well as the public cloud environment, which in this case is actually AWS. So of course, because we are in the cloud, we all know that the cloud has the benefit of elasticity and on-demand, meaning to say that you are actually more agile to react to any business requirements that you may actually have. And because VMware Cloud and AWS, they're actually running on AWS global infrastructure, so you can leverage on the AWS global infrastructure in the sense that it helps you to solve the problem of scaling. So you really can, because you cannot just build and buy data centers within as fast as how you can leverage on what a cloud has to offer. So you do have the benefits of agile scaling. So for adoption, there's definitely a case of easy adoption because what you run on vSphere on-prem is the same as what you run with the vSphere on AWS. The interface of managing the vCenter is the same look and feel. So what this means that your technical resources do not have to reskill and relearn whatever they have to, whatever they are actually familiar with. They can actually translate whatever knowledge that they have to the cloud. And that really, this familiarity really allows you to ramp up faster and use whatever services in a much faster way than as opposed to if you use a completely new platform. So from a cost perspective, cost is always a major consideration for any organizations who make their cloud migration journey. Essentially, VMware Cloud and AWS, you're running on a cloud model. So you're actually transiting from a CAPEX model to an OPEX model. With OPEX model, what it means that you're actually spreading your costs out over time, meaning to say that, and also your hardware maintenance upgrades are no longer your responsibility. So you can actually free your headcounts to do more value-adding stuff, you allocate funds and even staff time to more strategic initiatives. So that's where the cost-benefit ratio of running VMware stack on AWS as opposed to on-premises. So one of the benefits that we learned earlier, we know earlier as well, is VMware Cloud essentially allows you to integrate with native AWS services. Essentially, what this means is that you're actually having a more service-oriented IT model because you're already running on AWS bare metal instances, which your VMware stack is actually running on. So actually your services are actually closer to the cloud. So you do have access to the 200 plus AWS services which AWS has to offer. Okay, so with that introduction and that summary, right, let's really dive straight into the use cases and the overall architecture of what VMware Cloud AWS is. So actually, when you deploy your SDCC on VMware, what essentially happens in the background is that you're actually creating an SDCC stack on the AWS account, VPC, that's actually dedicated to your organizations, but actually is managed by VMware. But in order to access the AWS native services, you also must connect the SDCC that you have actually have and created to an AWS account that's actually belonging to you. And this is actually referred to as the customer AWS account. So what this means is that this connection, it allows the VMs actually running on your VMware as the SDDC on AWS to access AWS services belonging to your AWS VPC account. This connected VPC is actually owned and operated and paid directly by the customers if you choose to utilize any AWS services that runs within that account. And this AWS account, this customer AWS account also can belong to an AWS organization. And what this means also is, it means that you can actually park all the AWS account to an AWS organization so that you can actually centrally govern all your AWS cloud resources. So for the use cases, I actually categorize it into three broad categories. We have the data center evacuation, meaning to say that your strategy is mainly 100% cloud native. You're running everything on the cloud. Or you have another option, which is the data center extension, which is the hybrid cloud, which you have the best of both worlds, really, the benefits of the cloud and as well as off-premises. And the third option is actually the disaster recovery option, which I will share all these three use cases more in depth in the following few slides. Okay, so for use case one, it's actually a storage integration, whereby you can actually have your VMs in your VMware Cloud AWS account to access your S3 buckets, S3 being a more popular AWS resources. So what this means that actually you're not being constrained by the storage available on your each bare metal instance host. You do have the flexible options to really allow your VMs to access and utilize the native AWS storage services. So the connection happens in two ways. You can actually access the S3 either through the internet, or you can actually access it through the VPC endpoint. And when you actually access it through the VPC endpoint, typically you're actually not transversing over the internet. You're actually transversing through and via the AWS global network infrastructure. So it really depends on what is your requirements, and these are the various options actually available to you if you want to leverage on the storage options which AWS actually has to offer. So for use case two, actually it's one of the real work and implementation that Cloud Kinetics actually implemented. This is actually for a hybrid cloud scenario, whereby if you see here, there's an on-premises at the bottom, and the VMware Cloud on AWS stack at the middle, and the AWS native services on the most top of the diagram. So what this diagram translates to is that we're actually using the HCX to do the migration using internet. And you see here, there's actually two SDDC, SDDC1 and actually SDDC2. The workloads are actually workloads are actually replicated from SDDC1 to SDDC2 and vice versa via VPN connection. And if you notice, there's also a VPN connection to AWS. So, in the SDDC, you can notice that there's only the app. This is a typical three-tier architecture structure. You notice that there's an app layer and a DB layer in the VMware Cloud AWS. The web layer actually lies in the AWS accounts itself. So the requirements of this customer is they will actually, as such, they are putting their web server in the cloud so that it can scale accordingly, while the app and the DB layer resides in the VMware stack on AWS. And you also notice that there's actually one vCenter for each SDDC. Okay, so for use case 3, we are talking more about disaster recovery options. In the AWS world, there's actually 4 DR options which the customer can actually have choices to. But of course, which approach and which strategy that our customers would like to leverage really depends on their RPO and RTO, right? From the lower end of the spectrum, from one end of the spectrum, which is actually, you can have the RPO and RTO in terms of hours, and the other end of the spectrum, which is actually a hot standby approach, which is the RPO and RTO is actually in terms of seconds. So of course, as we move along the spectrum, the cost of running your workload typically increases because your hot standby is actually you're just having an exact replica of your primary region that is always on, but a backup and restore, essentially you're just having one environment per se, and you're just backing up and restoring in the event there's actually a disaster. So this is something which Cloud Kinetics, we really can work with you to understand that what is your RPO and RTO and how we can design the right solutions for you in terms of if you would like to leverage the disaster recovery options using the VMware Cloud in AWS. So, to dive straight into the use case tree, which is the backup and restore approach, essentially what this approach means is that you can always have on-demand disaster recovery at your fingertips. Because for VMware Cloud in AWS, it takes roughly about 120 minutes for the VMware stack to be provisioned. And if you look at the diagram, there's actually what happens in this diagram is that the on-premises backup, they actually configured with a backup repository that actually can be extended to the Amazon S3. And in the event of this disaster, the SDDC can be spin up within 120 minutes. And it can be through an automated process, and your workloads will then be up and serviced. And your Amazon Route 53, what it does is that it will really update the DNS records so that you can actually resolve the request to the new secondary data center in the cloud in the event that a disaster actually occurs. Okay, so before I end off, right, I really just want to highlight what Wenqi has mentioned earlier on in his sharing that from Cloud Kinetics perspective, we do really want to have work with our customers to really understand more about what is their requirements, what is their use cases. So what we do have is that we are actually offering a free proof of concept for any VMware Cloud on AWS journey. So what we do is that we really help to validate your use cases to understand what is your use cases that you want to have, and what is essentially an estimate of the cost that you may occur if you want to move your vSphere infrastructure from your on-premises to running on the AWS infrastructure. So to dive straight in more, what we'll do is, in the event that you actually engage us, we'll actually assess your current virtual infrastructure environment. We will actually identify what's the use cases that you want to deliver with our POC. We will provide a POC environment for you, and we'll implement the use case we actually identified during the assessment. Then we'll do a TCO, so-called like a TCO calculation and estimations, and we'll provide you a report based on that. Then we'll sign off the POC, and we move along this journey with you. Okay, so before I end off, I really do want to have a quick, question and answer session. So if you could, you can just tap on the chat, and we can review the answer in a few minutes. So is there a minimum node required when deploying your VMware Cloud AWS with Cloud Kinetics?
All right, everyone. This is your last chance to win that $50 gift voucher from Amazon. So all you have to do is type A or B. The first one to get the correct answer will be the winner. Okay, I think we have a winner, Lester. The correct answer is B. Is that right, Zihao?
Yes, right.
Yes.
So,
all right. So Lester's the winner. Go ahead.
Correct. So traditionally, if you are running a single tenancy on VMware Cloud in AWS, typically the minimum number of nodes you can have per cluster is actually 2. But what we offer, Cloud Kinetics offer, is that we do allow you to run a multi-tenancy model, meaning to say that you don't have to make the investment of the minimum number of nodes actually required. We make the investment for you, so you can actually run any available VMs that you actually require. So for example, it can range from 1 VM to maybe a few hundreds of VMs. It really depends on what is your use case actually. So you only do pay for what you use. So in the event that you only require 1 VM to run on this VMware Cloud AWS, it is certainly feasible because of this multi-tenancy model that you run with us. So right, congratulations, Lester.
Okay.
All right, so I'll pass on to Camille.
Thank you, Zihao. Thank you, everyone, for all your presentations. We will be opening up the floor now for our Q&A portion. So as I mentioned, everyone is free to just type in their questions. Wait, let me just... Zihao, sorry, could you please stop sharing for a bit? Yeah, there we go.
Apologies.
Okay. All right. So as I mentioned, we will be opening up the floor to any of your questions. I saw in the chat box there has been a back and forth between Joshua and Wenqi and Puneet. Wenqi, would you want to expand on that? You said that we can discuss more in the Q&A session.
Thank you, Camille. I guess thank you for making this interactive. It's not easy to have an interactive webinar. Right? Thank you for all the attendees to ask questions. Yeah, it's good to see people asking questions rather than you talk to you don't know who to talk to. Right? I guess thank you for Joshua asking all the questions. Maybe before thank you for Puneet try to address this. Before I try to. Readdress the question, Puneet, you do you say anything at all? He has a question is on what's our approach since the VMware have an XCX migration in a way migration tool, right? So what's our approach on Snowball and Outpost?
So VMC and AWS Outpost to begin with, when she is basically a service offering which is built upon the same architecture as VMware Cloud and AWS. The only difference is this now resides inside your data center itself, right? So VMC and AWS is predominantly built for customers who, because of data sovereignty or because of local cloud requirements, want to host the workloads on VMC and AWS, but do not want to take it away from their on-premises. And this is where VMware Cloud and AWS Outpost comes into picture. So some of the migration methodologies to VMware Cloud and AWS remains the same. We can still use HCX, which is optimized to migrate workload even for low bandwidth, high latency links. So there's an inbuilt WAN optimization engine built inside HCX, which allows you to even migrate, even if you don't have like a healthy pipe to do the migration. And that's the benefit. But besides that, HCX not just offers you like an online migration methodology, it also offers you offline migration methodology. So you can actually shut down the VMs, you can export it in a standard way, then you can bring them one by one and so on and so forth as well. So there are a couple of options. Snowball currently is not a support option, but that's definitely in the roadmap. So if there are enterprises who are really looking to migrate out their data and they want to leverage Snowball as a capability to take out the data and maybe move it to an edge location where they want to place VMC and AWS Outpost, as the question was, we can definitely explore that as a possible option, but down the line, yeah.
Thank you, Puneet. Maybe Viswa, you want to comment a bit on the use case for Snowball?
Yeah, so it really depends upon what exactly the requirement is, but let me quickly share my screen just to answer that question better. Let me know once you are able to see my screen.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is how the connectivity happens over, on VMware Cloud on AWS Outpost service. So which is GA in few of the regions, not available in all VMC regions for now, just as a disclaimer. But yeah, this is how the connectivity works, right? So from your AWS Outpost service to, to the external world, right? So, for example, if you are talking from an Outpost service, you see here that there will be a VMware managed AWS account where your Outpost service will lie, which is in one availability zone. And there could be, another availability zone, which is a customer connected VPC, for example, right, where you will have an AWS native VPC, and then you will have a customer on-premises account where your AWS Outpost rack will be located, right? So you have all this connectivity, set up here, where you will have a service link which will be accessed from your AWS Outpost service to your AWS Outpost rack. And the connectivity from your Outpost rack will be different, which goes onto an ENI connectivity onto your connected VPC. Yep. So Snowball, for example, is the question, as you mentioned about Snowball as well, is different to this architecture, right? It does not use the same architecture as AWS Outpost.
Yeah, I understand. But again, if it's a Snowball, I guess we'll be able to help them to bring large volume data maybe to the another,
absolutely,
the AWS account, right? If they want to connect, right? This will be an
absolutely.
Thank you, Sawa. I hope, Joshua, I hope this addressed your question, the first part of the question.
I think he's fine. He did say thanks. So Joshua, we do hope that did answer your question there. So it does. Thanks for the clarification. You're welcome. Does anyone else have any questions that they might want to ask? Please feel free to type it in. In the meantime, I do have a question here as well that was asked in the engagement question. So what's Cloud Kinetics plan to better support your customers' cloud journey? I think Zihao, you can answer this.
Sure. So Cloud Kinetics, we are actually a cloud-first company. So today, with today's choice of cloud solutions and deployment options, you want to navigate through all these options, require new cloud skills and infrastructure strategies, which most actually organizations lack. So what Cloud Kinetics actually do is we actually partner with our customers to help shorten this migration path and achieve whatever business objectives that the customer can have. So we will address uncertainties by reducing the need for trial and error and sidestepping common challenges. In addition to any cloud advisory, organizations can also take advantage of the growing number of programs that Cloud Kinetics will actually design to guide them through any new cloud implementation. And they may see significant advancement in these cloud migration programs and tools, and our customers should actually benefit from them. And also, we do bring to the market, like what I mentioned earlier, this new multi-tenant version of the VMware Cloud. So you do not have to make that significant investment in terms of the 2 nodes per cluster. No matter which number of VMs that actually you want to run. Let's say you have a smaller workloads, but you still require to leverage on the cloud benefits as well as running your VMware stack on the AWS cloud. That's where some of the advantages that we can actually provide for you as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I hope Zihao was able to answer your question. We have another question here from Kian. So for this VMC solution, if for migration of 5 to 8 VMs, how long can be done? Anyone?
So VMC migration, as I mentioned, happens predominantly in a couple of ways. We have methods of doing online as well as offline migration, and more often than not, you would want to go with an online migration because you don't really want any downtimes while migrating, and it is absolutely supported. I'll again bring back the point that HCX is the secret sauce which manages to do that. But the time it takes to migrate the VM is basically a factor of a few things. The number of VMs, the capacity of the VM you're trying to migrate, because you're doing an online flat file copy. But given the fact that we have WAN optimization and we have network deduplication methodologies to make the migration process faster, it would not take much time. Obviously, bandwidth is also another important factor. So, I mean, the link between your on-prem data center to the VMware Cloud, the geographical distance, right, to your cloud tenant versus your on-prem location. These are certain factors which can decide this. What VMware is actively doing is, and you would probably see that You can actually see that in the HCX migration tool interface itself, that when you initiate the migration, it can estimate all these factors and can give you an estimation time it would take for migration. Just to give you an anecdotal information, as I said earlier, we have customers who managed to have like a good link and they pre-prepared the migration well. We have managed to do hundreds of migrations over weeks, right? So, I mean, you can imagine that if I just, in retrospective, if I say 5 to 8 VMs, it can be done in a matter of hours or days at the max, provided we have all the pre-planning and the prerequisites taken care of.
Okay, thanks, Puneet. Kian, I hope that answers your question. We have another question from Jeffrey. Hi, I'm looking forward to do DR for on-prem VMware TKGI. Is VMC solution able to do this? Our pain point is migrating application with persistent storage. How is this possible?
Very, very good question, and I am glad someone asked that question. So yes, today, in the very recent release of VMC, which is M16 version, which was released about a month back, we now do support Tanzu services also on VMC. So if you're running a TKGI infrastructure, which is on-prem, which is running on Tanzu Kubernetes Grid, and you would want to host a similar environment on VMware Cloud and AWS using our DNS services, it's supported today because we now have Tanzu services G on AWS. So that's one part of the solution. Having said that, I would definitely want to bring up a point that Tanzu, like any Kubernetes platform, is a stateless architecture. So generally, the DR doesn't happen the same way you would do a DR for a standard virtual machine. And hence, your point that you would want to retain the state of your persistent storage, which is sort of a stateful component of the modernized application. We can definitely do that. We have methods of backing up and restoring on TKG. We can do it using some of our DR services like VCDR or VMware Site Recovery. And all that is possible today. So, I mean, in case you have this requirement, Jeffrey, I would strongly recommend reach out to your local VMware account rep, and we can definitely have a one-to-one session to talk about this in more details. It's possible today.
All right. Thank you, Puneet. Jeffrey, I hope that answers your question. All right, so we're running out of time for any questions. So if anyone would want to ask one more question to our panelists before we head on to our closing remarks. Okay. All right, I think we have no more questions. So just to update everyone as well, we will be sending you a copy of this webinar so you guys can go back to it. And if you have any further questions, you can feel free to connect with the people in this webinar. Moving forward, let's head on to Wenchi for our closing remarks.
Thank you, Camille. Thank you for everybody joining us. And very important, I am very glad to see these webinars are interactive. So thank you for all the attendees asking a lot of good questions, especially like all these all the questions like even the last question, Jeffrey, last very good question is a Luma question. That means, you know very well, right? I also thank you for the team, the core team, the support from VMware, the support from AWS to make this happen. Very important. Thank you for all this club. The way you organize the webinar really make everybody wake up, okay? That everybody trying to spot the worries. I hope everybody have fun, right, to attending this webinar. So I hope one day, I guess we have a serious VMC marketing activity coming along. I hope really one day I can see everybody in physical. Actually, we are having a physical workshop like in March. By then, I hope the situation improve, and then the physical workshop will be able to hold. Then I will definitely will invite all of you, whoever attend this, and then I really hope to see all of you in person. And I get a lot of things I want to mention, right? And Zihao actually mentioned the POC, right? So 2 years ago, when we launched this, actually, I would say VMware, right, will make you pay for a POC. Actually, we did have a few POC customers pay for it. I guess now, like, with the VMware AWS support, we are able to really offer this POC for free, right? If anybody interested or anybody want to try out, want to see, right? I would say no obligation. And then this I would say this is one of the way really help you to fast track, expedite your cloud journey. Please feel free to reach out to us to sign up for POC, or you want to know more information, reach out to us on the POC. Thank you again. Okay, maybe I will hand it back to Camille.
Sure. Thank you, Renchi. Thank you for those closing remarks. So we actually have a few more minutes. So I would like to play again the video. This time, let's make sure that there is sounds for everyone that missed it this earlier today. So everyone, please enjoy this video from Cloud Kinetics. Okay. All right. So as I did mention, we also will be having a lucky draw. So before we end the session, so Francis, please share. I'm sorry, Reza. Go ahead. So let's see who wins the Bose waterproof speakers. All right, we have Anthony from Wilmar International. Congratulations. So to everyone that did win something during the webinar, we will be in touch with you after this. And lastly, I would like to officially end this webinar. So thank you, everyone. We hope this session did spark some thoughts, and we encourage everyone to keep in touch. If you do wish to be connected to anyone from Cloud Kinetics, from VMware, or from AWS, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be very happy to connect you. So yeah, again, thank you, everyone, and stay safe, and we hope to see you all very soon. Thanks, everyone.